for your TOEFL test. Clear?
Okay.
Yep. You were not able to access that link. That is the reason I was also not able to access that link. That's the reason I had sent you the second link also. So that second link is directly the link to the form. Only there you won't get a timer. Okay, so you will have to time yourself. The previous link that I had shared with you, it had a timer. I was trying to send you that, but somehow like I'm still experimenting with that timer. Okay, so I was also not able to access. That's the reason I sent you the second link so that you could give it whenever you can. But make sure you time yourself according to the test. Okay, even if
Okay.
you're not, I wouldn't ask you to time yourself for the overall 2 hours. Instead, time yourself according to the sections. Okay,
Okay.
because in real tests sometimes it gets extended. So make sure you time yourself. For example, reading takes 36 minutes, so when you start reading, mark yourself for 36 minutes. Then once you start listening, you get 35 minutes, so make sure you mark yourself 35 minutes, and you get purely 16 minutes to answer, okay, in listening. So make sure whenever you're answering, you try to keep track of that time as well. Once you start writing, mark yourself for 30 minutes. Once you start speaking, mark yourself for 16 minutes. Okay, and of course you can take a break of 1 minute in between, but do not take any longer breaks. Make sure you give it in one session. The reason I say this is, first I used to share four different links for four different. So what student used to do is they used to give in one sitting listening, then after some time they used to give reading, in the evening they'll give writing. So that doesn't help out, because what happens is when you go for actual test, you have to give all these tasks in one go. Correct? When you give
Mhm.
one task, it's very easy. It doesn't exhaust you. But when you give five listening tasks in one go, after two reading tasks, it is very, very exhausting. And after that, you have to give speaking. After that, you have to give listening. So it is very exhausting. Okay. So that exhaustion, you should be used to it. Okay, that is the reason I ask you guys to give it in one sitting, so you know when you do one task for listening, then it's very easy to get 5 out of 5. But when you have to keep doing it one after another, your brain actually gives up. Okay, it can't absorb anything after it. So that's what you have to get used to. At least till the time of test, I would say. After that, then we have all the time in the world. We can do whatever we want. Correct? That's the only thing. Okay,
Okay.
so yesterday we finished with just content and just purpose question. Then we did detailed question. Then we did function question, and we even did attitude question. Correct? How attitude can be understood when whatever the speaker is trying to say. Now, first, today we are going to look at organization question. Okay, what do we mean when we say organization question? Any idea?
Organization, like to sum up the
Mm-hmm.
topic, something
Mm-hmm.
related to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yes, that is basically to understand the organization of the questions. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Tell me once it's visible. Yep. So, we are talking about overall organization of the lecture. So, or you can also be asked about the relationship between two portions of what you heard. Okay, so the question could be something like, how does the professor organize the information about she presents to the class, about the information that she presents to the class? How does the professor clarify the points he makes about Mexico? Correct? So that's how the question would be framed. That's where we have to make sure we understand how it is organized as well. That is the reason I said sometimes only depending on notes is not very, very helpful. We have to actively listen also to make sure these kind of questions we are able to answer without any difficulty. Okay, so here again you would be given something like the professor might say, there is this committee I am on. The name of the thing, and it's probably well you don't have to take notes about this. The name of the thing is academic standards. So see, he is taking so many digressions. Correct? He is deviating from the topic and he's coming back to the topic. So we are not supposed to get distracted over here. If you see, the meaningful sentence part is only this much. There is this committee I am on. The name of the thing is academic standards, but he is deviating. Correct? So the question might be, why does the professor tell the students that they do not have to take notes? So you have to select one answer. Because the information not may not be accurate, or he or she is telling the personal story. Correct? She is telling a personal story over here. So it is not important for the lecture. It's not going to come in exams. Correct? So that's the reason they don't need to take notes. So that's how you understand the organization also. So the questions might be something like, how does the professor organize the information? How is the discussion organized? Or why does the professor discuss about X? Why does the professor mention X? Such kind of questions could be given. Okay, that's where we have to understand. Now, questions that ask about overall organizations are likely to be found after lectures than after conversations. Okay, they won't be there in your conversations mainly, they would be mainly in your lectures. Okay, now refer to your notes if you want. And it may not have been apparent from the start that the professor organized the information in a chronological order, or from least complex to most complex, or in some other way. Okay, so we will need to understand there is no particular pattern that they follow usually. Pay attention to the comparisons made by the professor. Usually these kind of questions do come. In the following example, the professor is discussing the structure of plants. So he uses steel and steel girders in a new building to make a point. The professor may mention something that is seemingly off topic in order to explain a concept. Okay, the professor will mention something familiar to the students as a way of introducing a new idea. So that's how it is usually organized. We are not going to do this passage, we are going to instead listen to the audio, like watch the video basically. Okay, tell me once it's audible and visible to you.
Hi, I'm Michael
Is it audible?
It is. Yeah, it's.
Great.
from ETS. Today on Inside the TOEFL Test, we're going inside the TOEFL IBT listening section, specifically the organization questions. Organization questions ask you to show understanding of how a lecture is structured. You can recognize organization questions because they often include phrases such as, why does the professor mention? Or, why does the professor discuss? These kinds of phrases show that organization questions are often asked about the examples in a lecture. So it helps to listen for examples and think about why the professor is using them. Now let's look at a sample question. The question is from a literature lecture about detective novels, including one titled The Moonstone. The passage focuses on an important character from The Moonstone named Sergeant Cuff, who is trying to solve a crime. Here's an excerpt from the lecture.
So now Cuff arrives. Cuff is the man who's coming to solve the mystery. And again, he has a lot of the characteristics that future detectives throughout the history of this genre will have. He's eccentric. He has a hobby that he's obsessive about. In this case, it's the love of roses. He's a fanatic about the breeding of roses. And here, think of Nero Wolfe and his orchids, Sherlock Holmes and his violin. A lot of those later classic detective heroes have this kind of outside interest that they go to as a kind of antidote to the evil and misery they encounter in their daily lives. Now, these detective heroes, they have this characteristic of being smart, incredibly smart, but of not appearing to be smart. And most importantly, from a kind of existential point of view, these detectives see things that other people do not see. And that's why the detective is such an important figure, I think, in our modern imagination. In the case of The Moonstone, I don't want to say too much here and spoil it for you, but the clue that's key to the solving of the crime is a smeared bit of paint in a doorway. Of course, the regular police have missed this paint smear or made some sort of unwarranted assumption about it. Cuff sees this smear of paint, this paint, the place where the paint is smeared, and realizes that from this one smear of paint, you can actually deduce the whole situation, the whole world. And that's what the hero in a detective novel like this brings to it that the other characters don't. It's this ability to see meaning where others see no meaning, and to bring order to where it seems there is no order.
Here's an example of an organization question. Why does the professor mention a smeared bit of paint in a doorway in the...
Okay, try answering it.
A.
A. Okay, to describe a mistake that Sergeant Cuff has made.
the moonstone? Let's look at the answer choices one at a time. Choice A can be ruled out because the professor directly states that noticing the smeared paint is the key to solving the crime, not a mistake. For option B to be correct, there would have been a pattern of discussing details from the crime scene, but the smeared paint is the only visual detail from the crime scene that is mentioned. So option B is not correct. Option D can be eliminated because the professor states that the police officers didn't notice the smeared paint. Option C is the best answer because the professor talks about hero detectives and mystery novels and the characteristics they have in common. The professor indicates that there is a pattern when he says this.
These detectives see things that other people do not see.
Here's a
Understood why it was incorrect?
listening tip that can help you understand how a lecture is organized. Listen for the signal words that indicate the introduction, major ideas, examples, and the conclusion or summary. These might be sequence words like
Now, take a snap of it, I would say. These words are also important for us in writing. Okay, when we write or when we speak, these words become important for us because these words are the transitional words or signal words as they are called over here. Okay, when we transition from one sentence to another and when we are trying to connect the information, they become helpful for us. Okay.
first, next, and then. Or they might indicate time or a chronology, like before, during, or since. Or they could show cause and effect, like accordingly or as a result. These signal words are good cues for when to take notes. There are lots of ways to improve your English skills.
Okay, understood. Now, next we have one second. Making inference questions. That's the next that we have. Making inference questions. Okay. 1 minute. I think I missed out on something here. One question tape. Yes. First, before that, number 7 is connecting content question. Okay. Now, connecting content, here we have to make sure that we understand the relation between the ideas which are in the lecture again these types of questions are mainly found in a lecture because that's what they are trying to analyze because we are going to a foreign university for a lecture, correct? So whether you're able to understand something that is explicitly stated or sometimes you also may have to infer from what you hear. Okay, the questions may ask you to organize information in a different way from the way it was presented in the lecture. Usually you might get a table for this. Okay, so you have to make sure that you select all of them correctly. Otherwise, even one if it's incorrect, then you get marked 0 for it. Okay, that's the reason we have to make sure all the answers that we select are correct. Okay, that's where we have to make sure that we understand the categories, identify a sequence of events or steps in a process. And again, if we are taking notes, that's how we take notes also, so that we are able to answer such kind of questions easily. Okay, without losing out on any point. If you take notes easily or nicely over here, it's easy to score this. Okay, now let's look at a sample question over here with the help of the videos that we have.
Hi, I'm Michael from ETS. Today on Inside the TOEFL Test, we're going inside the TOEFL IBT listening section, specifically the connecting content questions. Connecting content questions ask you to show understanding of the relationships among ideas in a lecture. Connecting content questions may require you to fill in a chart or table, or they may ask things like, what is the likely outcome? This type of question will ask you to put together information from different sentences or different parts of the conversation or lecture. You may be asked to identify things like steps in a process, or cause-effect relationships. Or you may be asked to classify items in categories, or make a prediction. Now let's look at a sample connecting content question. The question is from a conversation between a coach and a student who are catching up on what happened while the student was away. Here's an excerpt from the conversation.
And the next thing is, Mary's transferring to another college next week. So we'll need someone to take over her role as captain for the second half of the season. And the other players unanimously picked you to take over as captain when Mary leaves.
Wow. I saw everybody this morning and nobody said a word.
They wanted me to tell you. So, do you accept?
Of course. But Susan's a much better player than I am. I'm really surprised they didn't pick her.
They think you're the right one. You'll have to ask them their thoughts.
Okay. I guess one of the first things I'll have to do as captain is make sure we get a thank you card out to the lady who's buying us the jackets.
Good idea. I have her address here somewhere.
And I'll make sure the whole team signs it.
Good. That's all the news there is. I think that's it for now. Oh, let me get you that order form.
Now let's look at the sample question. Note that for this one, you will choose 2 of the 4 answers. So why is the woman surprised?
Okay, try selecting the answers.
A and B.
A and B. Okay.
Remember this part of the conversation.
And the other players unanimously picked you to take over as captain when Mary leaves.
Wow. I saw everybody this morning and nobody said a word.
It's clear that everyone refers to the other team members, and no one said a word means that no one on the team said anything about having picked her to be their new captain. So B is one answer. The second answer is explained when the student says this.
But Susan's a much better player than I am. I'm really surprised they didn't pick her.
By saying someone else on the team is a better player, that means that she is not the best player. So A is the other correct answer. Here's a tip to help you connect ideas when you listen. When you listen to recorded material for the first time, stop the recording at various points and try to summarize what had been said. Then predict what will be said next. There are lots of ways to improve your English skills.
Okay, that's great. You got the answers correctly over there. Now the last question type that we have is how to make inference. How to make an inference. We already know what inference means. Inference means concluding something from what is being said. Correct? We already know that. Now, inference questions, they are not very difficult, but sometimes they can be difficult. Now, What does the professor imply about? What will the student probably do next? What can be inferred about? Or sometimes you might get an option to replay the audio also. That is how the questions will be. Okay, in some cases, the answering this kind of question correctly means putting together the details from the lecture or the conversation to reach a conclusion. Okay, in other cases, the professor may imply something about directly stating it. In most cases, the answer you choose will use vocabulary which is not found in the conversation or the lecture. That means it will be paraphrased. It won't be given directly. Okay, that is the reason they are inferred questions. It's not something which is given directly. It is not a detail or a fact which has been given over there. So that's where we have to make sure that we listen to it and we are able to analyze and comprehend it very well. Okay, it's not only understanding of what are the words being used over there, it is also understanding what is being said over there. Okay, actually, so let's try to solve this with the help of a video.
ETS. Today on Inside the TOEFL Test, we're going inside the TOEFL IBT listening section, specifically the inference questions. Inference questions ask the listener to show an understanding of the meaning of something when it is not directly stated in the lecture or conversation. You can recognize inference questions because they use phrases like, "What are the implications of?" "What does the professor imply?" or "What can be inferred?" Let's look at a sample inference question from a literature lecture about detective novels, including a famous one called The Moonstone. First, here's an excerpt from the lecture.
In The Moonstone, as I said, Collins did much to establish the conventions of the detective genre. I'm not going to go into the plot at length, but, the basic setup is there's this diamond of great value, a country house. The diamond mysteriously disappears in the middle of the night. The local police are brought in an attempt to solve the crime, and they mess it up completely. And then the true hero of the book arrives. That's Sergeant Cuff. Now, Cuff, this extraordinarily important character, let me try to give you a sense of who Sergeant Cuff is by first describing the regular police. And this is the dynamic that you're going to see throughout the history of the detective novel, where you have the regular cops who are well-meaning but officious and bumblingly inept. And they are countered by a figure who's eccentric, analytical, brilliant, and able to solve the crime. So first, the regular police get called in to solve the mystery. In this case, Detective Superintendent Seagrave. When Superintendent Seagrave comes in, he orders his minions around. They bumble and they actually make a mess of the investigation, which you'll see repeated. You'll see this pattern repeated, particularly in the Sherlock Holmes stories of a few years later, where Inspector Lestrade, this well-meaning idiot, is always countered by Sherlock Holmes, who's a genius.
Now let's look at the question.
What does the professor imply when he says this?
Well, let me try to give you a sense of who Sergeant Cuff is by first describing the regular police.
We can
Okay, which do you think is the correct option here?
Is it A?
A? Okay.
see that this is an inference question because it uses the word imply and asks the listener to understand the meaning of something that is not directly stated by the professor. When the professor says this,
well, let me try to give you a sense of who Sergeant Cuff is by first describing the regular police.
he is hinting that there is a difference between the behavior of the regular police and that of Sergeant Cuff. This contrast is supported in other parts of the passage. For example, the speaker describes the regular police as bumblingly inept. He also says it is common in detective novels for them to be countered by a specific character, in this case, Sergeant Cuff, who is brilliant. Taken together, we can see that the best answer is A. Sergeant Cuff is unlike the regular police in the Moonstone.
Okay, that was correct. Very good.
Here's a tip for improving your listening skills. Listen to recordings of two speakers with different viewpoints about the same topic. What words do the speakers use to support their ideas? Are the words mainly positive or negative? Then look at how they imply positive or negative ideas without saying them directly. There are lots of ways to improve your English.
Okay, understood? So that was the last type of question that we have. Now what I expect from you, your home assignment basically is that you go through the whole chapter. Okay, go through the other chapters also, because we are done discussing the question types. As I have told you, tomorrow we would be starting with our lessons which we have, along with some of grammar lessons also, which are very important for you. Okay, so before that you should be thorough with these question types, and make sure you keep revising them on regular basis as well, because these question types are very, very important. You don't have to remember them by heart, but you should know what each question expects from you. Okay, because again, with these each questions, the time that you spend with them also differs, and that's how we are able to manage our time and go through the chapter. Try to do the questions which they have given over here also. For these questions, they haven't given you audios, they have just given you transcripts, but still try to get the idea of how the answers can be and the questions can be. Okay, and go through the tips and strategies also along with it. If you have any questions after that, do reach out to me, not a problem. We will stop over here for today. Okay, along with that, I also expect you to do, if on test ready, if you don't have any listening task today, do the listening task, practice set 1 and practice set 2 from this book. Okay, practice set 1 is your conversation and practice set 2 is your lecture. What I'll do is I will share the audios with you for this book. Okay, you have already given me the email ID. Your email ID is brmm@gmail.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I still am not sure if I pronounce your name correctly.
It's okay.
Okay. So I'm going to share the audios. Sometimes some audios might be little up and down. Okay, so make sure you look at the transcript also if you need.
Okay.
For listening
Thanks.
set 1 and listening set 2, at least the audios are given properly. For some tests, I guess they have given the audios incorrectly. Okay, so make sure if you face any difficulty, the audios are there, the numbering might just be different. I have shared the audios with you. Okay, you must have received an email. Okay, so we will stop over here for today. Do revise everything that we have done till now. Okay, because we have only actually less than 20 days now. So we have to make sure that we gear up for it accordingly. Okay then. And give them mock test also as you get time today. But give it in one sitting. Make sure you have 2 hours. Give it in one sitting. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. No problem. See you tomorrow. Have a
Thanks.
great
See
day
you.
ahead. See you.
You too.
Bye.